Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about all of the different spring game cancellations. Texas, USC, Nebraska have all decided they are no longer going to do a spring game. I don't love it, I'll be totally honest with you, but at the end of the day, I understand where they're coming from. A lot of money saving that has to happen, a lot of different things that go into that decision, and I think a little bit of NFL that goes into that decision, and I think we'll see a lot of more teams make that decision over the next couple of years. But let's get into the combine. That is what's going on this week up there in Indianapolis. There's been a little bit of drama around a couple of different reporters up there, but we'll leave that to the side for the time being. Let's just go through this. Let's go through all the big time storylines. We'll start with the schedule, we'll get to the teams that you're going to see the most from a college perspective, and then we'll get into some players that are not participating, some big time players to watch, and definitely one guy that I think can gain just about as much as anyone throughout this next little bit. Excuse me, I'm a little bit ahead of myself there, but let's get to the schedule first. That's the thing we want to check off here, and it starts today, at least in earnest. It starts today. Now, the place kickers, defensive linemen, and linebackers will do their measurements, they'll do on field workouts. And there's a couple of guys in those groups that are just huge to watch. There's a couple of guys, that D-line class is as deep as you can possibly imagine, going to be incredible to watch them go through on-field workouts. And then you also have DBs and tight ends doing team interviews. So a guy like Tyler Warren, who we'll talk about here in a second, who is not going to work out during this week, this will be a huge day for him. It'll be interesting to see how he comes out of it. Frankly, I don't think a lot's going to change. I think that's your tight end one all the way up to draft day, but obviously will be a huge day for him because he won't have too much else going on this week other than those team interviews. Then you move on to Friday, and the place kickers, defensive linemen, linebackers, they move on to bench press. DBs, tight ends, they move on to the field, do the measurements, do the on-field workouts, and that'll be a fascinating thing to watch, especially for that deep tight end class that doesn't have Tyler Warren now working out or Colston Loveland. A lot of ability for a guy like Gunnar Helm or a guy like Elijah Arroyo to really jump up into those rankings. And then you have running backs, quarterbacks, and wide receivers going through team interviews. So Shadur Sanders, Cam Ward, that will be the talk of the day on Friday. A lot of different news coming out around those two guys, and it sounds like those two guys have two teams that are really circling them right now in that 2 and 3 slot, but a lot of things that will unfold over the next little bit, and we will obviously get into that as the draft gets a little bit closer. Go over to Saturday. The place kickers, defensive linemen, linebackers, they have left by this time. DBs and tight ends move on to bench press. Running back, quarterback, wide receivers, their measurements, their on-field workouts are on Saturday. And then O-linemen get into the team interviews. And that'll be an interesting thing to watch. Guys like Kelvin Banks, Will Campbell, all of those guys up at the top will be fascinating to see how they Armand Membu is going to be really interesting to watch as well. But it's going to be fascinating to see how all of that unfolds. And then you get into Sunday, and running backs, quarterbacks, wide receivers, they move on to bench press. Then they head out of Indy, and O-linemen finally get into their on-field workouts. They have to wait quite a bit to get into their business. But at the end of the day, all this is in full swing. You know, a couple of people have already done team interviews. There's already been a little bit of talk. Feels like those top 4 picks, at least as of right now, feel pretty solid. Now, there's a lot of different time to go between now and the draft, and even now until the end of the weekend. But at the end of the day, it feels like we're getting pretty close to having a relatively good idea of who's going number 1 overall, and frankly, in my opinion, it's the best player in the class. But we'll get into that in time. If you want to go look at a couple of my rankings for the quarterbacks, for the defensive and offensive prospects, head on over to the blog. I have all of that there. So more than welcome to go look over there and tell me how dumb I am for having different rankings. But at the end of the day, let's get into the teams you're going to see from a college perspective. And it starts with the national title winners. Ohio State, obviously, is setting the pace for this combine. They could add 2 more guys. If Sonny Styles and Davison Igbinosun did not decide to go back to Ohio State, they'd very much be in Indianapolis this week, and that number would be 17. But they're up at 15 right now. Going to be awesome to watch Will Howard go through workouts. He's my QB4 right now. Definitely could jump up in that list, definitely could jump down in that list with a couple of different guys coming in with huge weeks. And then you get into Texas and Georgia at 14 each. Remarkable. And I think between them, they probably have 4 of the top 15 picks. When you talk about Michael Williams and Jalen Walker over on the Georgia side, and then for Texas, Kelvin Banks, Jahdae Barron, both guys that could very well go in the top 15 picks. Jahdae Barron becoming a very popular guy around the draft process, and I can promise you, when he gets into those team interviews, teams are going to fall in love with this kid. I can absolutely promise you that. He works so hard and is a remarkably versatile player. But then you get into Oregon, a really good team. Will be awesome to see what Dylan Gabriel can do. Ole Miss, Jackson Dart will be great to see what he can do. Walter Nolan is the guy that I'm watching very closely today and tomorrow. See how he does with the D lineman. And South Carolina, Gotta watch Kyle Kennard. He's going to be fascinating. A lot of different people have a lot of different opinions about where he's going to go. Is it going to be late first round? Is it going to be early second round? Is it going to be late second round? A lot of different movement in that edge rushing class, and he's going to try to fly up those boards. And then you got Miami. Cam Ward's leading the way, obviously. Xavier Restrepo, I'm so excited to see. And then Elijah Arroyo, one of my favorite players in this entire draft class. I think he's going to be a downright star at the next level. Cannot wait to see him go through workouts here pretty soon in the next couple of days. But those are the teams that you're going to see the most often. Those are the teams you're going to see represented. Obviously, will not have the logo on their chest anymore, but at the very least, Ohio State fans, you get to watch 15-year guys go through that combine process and hopefully come out with some pretty good grades from it. But another thing to watch is the people that just aren't participating, the people that aren't doing the workouts. We've already talked about a couple, but Shedeur Sanders will not throw at the combine. He will throw at his pro day, and I think that'll do the trick. I don't necessarily think he has to throw. The interviews will yield a lot here. That's definitely something that I think a lot of teams are looking at first. They would love to get him in that room. I realize I spelled his name wrong now. Apologies, Shedeur Sanders. It is EU, not UE. Apologies. But at the end of the day, the interviews are going to be very interesting. Over the next couple of days, we'll get a lot of intel about what different teams thought about him, what the Browns thought, what the Giants thought, what the Titans thought, which maybe could still be the number one overall pick, but he will not be throwing this week. Would love to see him throw, but at the end of the day, that pro day with LeJounte Wester and Travis Hunter and all of his guys, I think that would be more than fruitful for him, so that'll be an interesting thing to watch. Also, Cam Ward, another guy that is still very much up in the air. Don't know if he's going to throw. If I were him, I would throw, especially with Shedeur not throwing. I would try to steal the show, and I would throw this week, but definitely something to watch. He could decide not to, and then the door opens for a guy that I'm going to talk about here in a second, but Abdul Carter is not going to participate in the workouts. He will be doing interviews as well. He suffered an injury towards the end of Penn State season, so still kind of nursing that. Frankly, if you want to drop him to that 15 spot so my Falcons can pick him up, I would not mind that at all, but let's be honest, he is not falling to the 15 spot. I frankly believe he's going to be the number one guy off the board. There's not a thing in the world that can change anything about this guy. He is my top prospect in the entire draft. He's an absolute freak of nature. He could sit on his couch for the next 2 months. I'm still drafting him number one overall. Freak of nature and definitely a guy that I want on my football team. His teammate, Tyler Warren, like we talked about earlier, will not participate in workouts either. Neither will Colston Loveland. So those top two tight ends that likely will go in that first round are not going. There's a lot of tight ends that really like that idea. There are a lot of tight ends that really want to make a name for themselves this week, and without Tyler Warren on the field, that'll be just a little bit easier. So that'll definitely be an interesting thing to watch. A very, very good football player. He'll go through interviews in the next couple of days, and he's going to be tight end one. Let's just be totally honest. I don't think that changes this weekend, but a lot of guys are very happy that they don't have to share the field with Tyler Warren on in the next couple of days. And then Ashton Jeanty, kind of the same exact thing with Tyler Warren. He did not need to work out. He is going to be the running back one. There are a lot of incredible running backs, and I'll come out with my rankings because the top 10 is just impossible to figure out with his running back class. It's so darn good. But at the end of the day, Ashton Jeanty will be your running back one. He didn't need to work out this weekend. The interviews will do plenty for him, and he's going to be an incredible, incredible back at the next level, but we won't quite get to see him go through workouts this upcoming week. But what are the players that are going to work out and have huge weeks ahead of them? I think Quinn Ewers starts the day. I think he is the biggest guy you're going to be watching this upcoming weekend because it sounds like this past year he was dealing with an oblique tear, not just an oblique strain that was reported throughout the year that it was an oblique strain. That's what he was dealing with. Sounds like it was a real tear of his oblique, and he was just kind of battling through it. Now, I don't know how much that changes going forward. I don't know if that changes his draft stock a ton or just a little bit, but he is fully healthy going into this week. He does get a chance to really show what he can do as a fully healthy quarterback, and you haven't really seen that since that Michigan game where he had a really good game. He was a very, very good player and definitely could jump up into that quarterback 3 position. I have Jackson Dart there right this second, but absolutely could be Quinn Ewers by the end of this week. I think he'll do a great job in the interviews, and then it's going to be a huge workout for him. He's got to prove that that injury did hold him back just a little bit throughout this year, and he's got to be able to put on a show if he wants to jump up in that board, because right now I would put him probably in that late second round. I think he could very well jump into the late first round if he has a really good week and really surprises some people and shows that that injury did have a ton to do with how effective he was this past season. Mike Green is another guy you're going to want to watch out for. The edge rusher from Marshall has really started to turn heads, and if you watched him at all in the 2024 season, you fully understand why. A terrifying person, a guy that can absolutely tear people to pieces. He did that in the Senior Bowl. In the Senior Bowl, he was the talk of the town. He was the guy that was dominating everyone down there in Mobile, and I think he could lock up a first-round position in the next couple of days. He might already have locked up a first-round position, but maybe even could be a top 15 pick. Wouldn't mind this guy going to my Atlanta Falcons either. So very, very talented kid, and I think over the next couple of days, a lot of people are just going to try to confirm what they've seen on tape. They want to make sure that the measurables all go out. They want to make sure that the on-field workouts match what they're seeing on tape, and if it all does, then I have no doubts that this guy will be a top 15 pick, and he'll be a very effective edge rusher at the next level. And then Tedariah McMillan is a very interesting guy that we're going to be watching throughout this week because he started as a number 6 overall pick to the Raiders and a number 5 overall pick to the Jaguars. And being among the class of a Travis Hunter or a Shadur Sanders, now he's kind of dropped down. I've seen him at 19. I've seen him at 20 for the Chargers. I've seen a couple of different picks for him. He could fly right back up into the top 10 this week. He is such a physically imposing person. He is such a remarkable player when it comes to 50-50 balls. Really reminds me of Drake London among a lot of other players at the NFL level, but he's definitely a guy that if he puts together good workouts, if he puts together really good interviews, he could jump right back up into the top 10. I think right now he's sitting somewhere in the teens and could very well stay there and would be more than fine with that because if you go to the Buccaneers, you're going to be more than fine. If you go to the Chargers, you'll be more than fine, and those are the two teams that I've seen kind of around him the most. But I do think he's a guy that this week is going to be huge. You know, he wants to prove that you were actually right the first time. You know, when I was getting picked number 6 overall, that's a little bit closer to where I should be instead of number 19, number 20, and this week will be huge for him to kind of prove that to everyone, and it'll be awesome to watch. There's no doubt about that. But overall, the Combine's always awesome. It's always an interesting time to see some of our players kind of go off to the next level. You know, if you're an Ohio State fan, you get to see your guy Jack Sawyer. You get to see your guy Will Howard go off to that next level and really start that process. And you get to see him kind of represent your team for the very last time. Now, I will remind everyone that the tape is going to do the talking. So someone could have a great week this week and not find their way into the first round. Someone could have a terrible week and still be a top 12 pick. It's just at the end of the day, people take this with a grain of salt. Make sure that you understand that this is far from the end-all be-all, but will be a very fun week. Will give us a lot to look forward to at the next level and a lot of really special players. When you look at that running back class, that tight end class, that defensive line class, love them all. Cannot wait to see all of them unfold, and it's going to be a special, special time in this next couple of days and a lot of movement if I had to imagine. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC, of Just Another College Football Podcast. Still kind of getting right here, but we'll call it episode 1 of season 2 of Just Another College Football Podcast. New and improved now on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, all the socials as you've seen earlier in the show. More than welcome to follow me over there, interact with me as much as you want, ask any questions you have, come after me for my bad rankings, whatever you have. I'm more than happy to interact with you guys. Would love to be able to interact with everyone on here. So thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe and like wherever you are on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Like and subscribe. Do it over on all of them, and tell some of your friends to come on over and subscribe and like as well. But thank you once again for watching, and I will see you guys next week.